When I joined Facebook, there was no ads on Instagram. And obviously they came stories, they came reels. The culture also changed, evolved. So there was different things. And I started as like an individual contributor, where I was kind of just doing my own specialist. And then I explored people management. I was really passionate about that. Was able to do new roles. It just evolved over time. You also need to figure out when is enough time enough, But yeah, finding things that you can, that it can challenge you. And I think it's always about your own curiosity in the end of the day. One is what is given to you, or like what opportunities come across. The other thing is like what do you make of those opportunities? It's not what happens to you, but it's what you do with what happens to you, right? This type of philosophy. And I think it's also that curiosity, like being able to learn something new or taking that further. Nobody's going to tell you to that, but that's really how you can grow. You can really grow within your own role if you try to look at things in a new way or try to take proactivity, new responsibility.
Real people, real stories, and real challenges that break the status quo. I'm your host, Živile, and welcome to Perception Paradox. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Perception Paradox, and today I have Prashant in the show. And for our listeners who don't know, so he's the CEO of foodora, and before he had impressive roles at Google and Meta, and I think we met through Exec youth organization that's incredible and is empowering leadership across the globe. So Prashant, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It's really great to have you. I'm really thankful that you found time in your busy schedule to jump in here, share your experience, share what you've been doing with foodora, because it's also quite an impressive journey. So yeah, how are you today?
Yeah, good. It's a busy time, but I enjoy when there's a lot of things going on. So yeah, it's winter. I'm based in Norway, and now it hasn't snowed in a couple of days, but it's still pretty cold. So trying to make the most out of the season, if you will.
Is it your first season in Norway?
Yeah, like I just moved back to Norway after 15 years abroad. So I was living in Ireland for 12 years and in Kenya and in the Netherlands as well. Moved back. I've obviously been here sometime during the winter, but one of the plans is to really embrace the winter and, like try some snowboarding and these types of things. I know you are really into snowboarding, so I'll probably not be as good as you, but I'll at least... that's what they say. When it gets darker, there's not so much sun, then how can you make the most out of the seasons, right? Rather than looking at what doesn't work, how do you embrace it, essentially?
100%. You can also do cold bathing. It's kind of a great place to do that, the cold exposure, Wim Hof and everything.
Yeah. It's actually quite a few people in my office that go before work. They cycle or they run down to the Oslo Fjord, which is kind of in the city center, and there are all these like floating saunas there. So some of them, they have this, this ice, they make a hole and then you can jump into it. So you go kind of literally ice bathing and then you go into the sauna afterwards and then they come to the office once that's done.
All energized, super pumped. And
I haven't been able to do it yet to find the time in my schedule, but definitely an ambition of mine.
Okay, that sounds like a great ambition. So far it seems that your reintegration and experience of long time no see winter is going pretty okay.
Yeah, I was skiing last weekend, actually. So we have a place not too far from where I live. So my 3-year-old, almost 4-year-old son went on a course for the first time. So he was going up this little ski lift, like it was,
that's cute.
It was pretty cute. But it's good so far, but need to up my game, I would say.
Okay, nice. No worries. Like just as long as you practice, it always goes up the game anywhere in the life, right? So you just need to find time. I think that's the challenge we have nowadays. So, Prashant, you moved back to Norway to explore new adventures and you joined foodora as a CEO. It seems like an exciting chapter for you. So what led you to this decision, changing the industries from really high tech going to... It's also tech, but it's a bit different. It's also people business a lot.
Yeah, I don't know if you've been watching what has been happening to my previous employer recently with Meta, so
it's
probably
everywhere.
It was a good time to leave anyways. I was predicting that to happen. No, but so I was working, I was in Dublin in kind of the Silicon Valley of Europe, as some people like to call it, for the last 12 years or so. So I was first at Google for a couple of years, and then I was it was called Facebook back in the day. Some of you might have heard about it. And then it was rebranded to Meta, because people had a bad association with Facebook, and was there for almost a decade, so more than 9 years there. And I was sort of leading the commercial teams for the Nordics at the end. So, working with small, medium, large size advertisers and helping them get the most out of the platform, leading teams. And obviously things change a lot. Like when I first started at Facebook, there was no advertising on Instagram, and there was no reels, there was no stories, and then these things were kind of adapted over time. And obviously, I remember I sold the first ad on Instagram in Norway back in the day, and then I also sold the first ad on YouTube when I was at Google back in the day. So kind of part of those emergent trends over the years. So that was exciting, and now it's kind of a part of people's lives and something that people are using every single day. So I would say for me, I was keen. I'm always keen on working in companies or products that people are using, like consumer-facing products, because that's something where it has an impact on people's lives. So I would say both Google and Facebook or Meta, it's something that billions of people are using every single day, and everybody knows, for good or for bad. In the beginning, it was very good, and then over time, people started having perhaps more negative association towards the impact in the world, etc. But generally a big impact, regardless of what that impact was. But I was also keen on kind of like, how can I broaden my scope and go to kind of new industries? And I'm more like, okay, what are the opportunities out there? What's interesting? What's exciting? And it was always a question like, when should I move back to Norway? Am I ever going to move back to Norway? And for me, it was also like having 2 kids, first one and then a second one, and my wife is Polish, and we're living in Ireland where we don't essentially have any family. So we're like, okay, when the right opportunity comes along, then let's move back and see how that is. Give it a couple of years and see if we really like it. So it was kind of like when the right opportunity arises. Was talking to got a phone call one day and was exploring this really exciting opportunity. When I got the offer, we're like, let's give it a shot. I had a lot of experience with kind of commercial teams, leading commercial teams, and obviously working within digital marketing, the marketing side. But perhaps I didn't really have so much experience with operations, right? So the operations of food delivery, or for those of you who don't know, Foodora, it's a part of Delivery Hero groups, which is actually Delivery Hero is the world's largest food delivery company. It's present in over 70 countries around the world, in all parts of the world, all continents. And they have different brands in different parts of the world. So Foodora is in 6 European countries, the brand Foodora. And then there are other brands in Turkey. It's something called Yemek or Yemeksepeti. There's Glovo, which is, some European countries, some countries in Africa and Caucasus, etc. There's like Food Panda. There's, the list goes on, so to speak, right?
Wow, that's a huge
kind of like food delivery. It's kind of the emergence of tech and people. It's kind of the connection point, because it's not deep tech the way that, at Facebook and at Google, it's all the engineers are in Silicon Valley, and they are the ones who are building the product for the world, right? It's like a tech engineering focused company, both of them pretty much, right? But in food delivery, obviously there's the tech empowered by tech. You have the app and the tech stack behind that, but a lot of it is actually people, right? They're physical customers, they're physical restaurants and, shops. And riders, the ones who are delivering the food or the goods, they're also people in most cases. We're exploring some robots and some drones and stuff like that. But to a big extent, it's kind of the people-powered aspect, right? So for me, it was really exciting, from leading primarily on the commercial side to now leading the business 360 degrees, right? So back in the day when I was doing an MBA, I did an MBA in Madrid, actually, at Instituto de Empresa, or IE Business School. Some of you might know, you there at an MBA, you kind of learn the business from all sides, right? You learn a little bit of finance, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of HR related topics, etc. So like you get an understanding operations, and being a CEO or managing director of a scale up, or however you want to call it, it's listed in Germany, but it is very much the ethos of the company is very much like a startup, like get your hands dirty, be really involved and stuff. Was really exciting, right? So it's like being able to have the bird's eye view of understanding what impacts, what are the most important metrics, while also being able to get into the details and kind of impacting every part of the organization was, I guess, so far has been really exciting.
That's nice. And how is the pressure from the environment? The last time we spoke now, right, to prep for the call, you mentioned that there have been quite few CEOs before you coming into a position, and there are now the bettings and guessings for how long you're going to stay.
You know, I was at Meta for almost 10 years. So I was like longer at the company, longer than like 99% or 98% of the company, right? So I stayed for a long time. You know, here it's like, how long am I going to stay? And for me, it's more like, as long as I find it's interesting and then developing and then able to add value, then, you know, I'll stay. And, you know, one of my philosophies in life is like, I'm not the person that has like a 10-year plan or a 5-year plan. This is where we're going to be in 5 years, but really like, as long as I can have impact and I can contribute, that's the most important thing, right? So obviously, it is like fast moving, you know, big tech companies. There was a lot of change, and here as well, you know, like obviously the role as a managing director, you are in the end responsible. You're the end responsible. You're responsible for the profit and loss of the company. You know, if the company gets sued, you know, like you are the one who can potentially be liable. So it's for good and for bad. You know, it's like Spider-Man used to say, with great power comes great responsibility. So it's obviously the responsibility of being good stewards of the company and the way that things are, and being able to contribute towards that. So it's obviously a hyper competitive industry. It's a lot of, it's like a low margin, high volume business, right? So it's different than perhaps big tech, which is like, you know, high margin business with less competition, you would argue, right? Because you have basically monopoly over people's attention in some ways. So there are different elements to that. So I think for me, it was like the interesting aspect there. But that also means that things change a lot. So you need to stay with the times. You need to be agile, because what worked today or yesterday might not work tomorrow. So you have to always question your assumptions and see if they actually are still correct.
100%. Very well said. Yeah, that seems like a fun journey you're on. And you have quite a lot of people working within the company, right? Is it like 400 employees and then
yeah, exactly.
3,000 plus drivers, right?
Yeah, exactly. So 400 employees, it's a combination of some employed writers, you know, people who are here in this office, in this pink office. So you might see my pink background. Pink is the ethos of foodora, right? So it's delivering happiness through that. We have also what's called D-marts or dark stores. I don't know if you know what those are, Zil, but it's basically like supermarkets where people do not go into to buy, but you have pickers that pick stuff from from those dark stores, and then they deliver home to you, right? So we run quite a few of those dark stores as well. So it's a combination of different types of I guess talent within the company, depending on what are the different sites. And then we have a few thousand overall riders, if you will, or people who work for us across the country. And yeah, like one of the things I'm really proud of is how we actually provide the possibility for people who don't get jobs otherwise to enter the job market. So there was a study that we recently did some weeks ago around how open are leaders or people who hiring managers to hiring people who don't have any work experience from Norway. And it was something like, you know, like 60% of people of hiring managers are skeptical to people who don't have any local work experience. But after they have 1 year of work experience of work for one employer in Norway, then suddenly the openness towards them becomes a lot larger. So in that sense, like there's a lot of people that work as writers for us who are, for example, Ukrainian refugees, right? Or people who just like, it's a flexible employment model, or you're either an employee or you're a freelance or however it is, can fit your schedule, and you know you can decide whether you want to take an order or not, right? If you're freelance, which creates the flexibility and at least gets you to be able to engage with other people and you know spend time outside, because if you're in a new place, you don't want to be isolated, right? It's winter, it's dark. You want to be able to engage and socialize. We're social beings, right? In the end of the day. So I think it's important. You don't want your mind to destroy you, or this like existential. This is one of the things that I realized actually after I got kids, is that before, I used to have a lot of like, you kind of have this like existential dread sometimes, like, oh, what is the meaning of life type of thing. But then when you have these kids, like you have a very busy schedule, you don't really have time for these types of thoughts, because you just have to survive. You just have to kind of keep going as much as you can, so to speak. So I think it's just important to have things that keeps you occupied as human beings, right? And I think for us, it might not be like a work that people are doing for years and years. Some people do it for many years, but for a lot of people, it is a part-time type of work that enables them to get some additional money, so to speak. Some students during the holidays, like a lot of different types like this. So I think it's a good thing. And the industry might get a bad rep in certain countries. And of course, there are different labor legislations in different countries where, like there might be more of potential issues in some markets. But I guess in a country like Norway, where you can earn a decent wage by doing this type of work, it's actually not a bad option for a lot of people.
For sure. And how do you differentiate from other food delivery platforms like Wolt, for example, is kind of really also aggressively taking over the European delivery service for sure.
Yeah.
What makes you different, and how do you actually compete in this whole landscape?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? So Volt, they're very competent competitor, no doubts about it, and they also do really well. They're originally a Finnish company, actually. I don't know if you knew, but they were founded in Finland.
Yeah.
They were then acquired by DoorDash, so then they got a lot of American money. So that's obviously helped them with their expansion plans. So I think, competition is good, for any industry because it keeps you on your toes. And I think that's obviously some of the beauty of the private sector, right? You have to compete, you have to innovate, you have to become better, more efficient, And I think obviously during the COVID times and Corona, there was a lot of people started using food delivery, and that wasn't necessarily the case before. And now it's obviously like people are going back to physical restaurants, but more and more people have opened their eyes for those possibilities, right? Where we're actually enabling people to get time back. People, let's say in my situation, you have small kids or you're busy, you have a busy schedule, you don't have time to cook. Obviously, it's nice to cook as well, but it gives you that ability to order food or groceries or other types of things. So I would say for us, all competition actually expands the market because it actually opens up the eyes to other players. And like, let's say somebody tries Volt, then perhaps they are also more open to try foodora as well. Obviously, we want to get them into our ecosystem, so we have a subscription program. They also have a subscription program. So like the differentiating factor usually is like who has the best deals and discounts, who has the restaurants or the shops that I really want to get to that I really want to engage with, and who do I have a good experience with, right? Like that's kind of the tech stack or the app in terms of that aspect. Does that really resonate, and do I have a good experience? Like when I order food and it says it's going to arrive in 30 minutes, does it actually arrive in 30 minutes, right? If you get a bad experience with us or with somebody else, then, and you wait 2 hours and the food gets canceled, that's a bad experience, right? Then
that's a sad one.
Very unlikely to order again from that platform. So you obviously want to avoid these types of bad experiences because you want to create sort of loyalty in that aspect, right? So I would say for us, it's also like in innovation, it's expanding also just beyond food. So originally it was like restaurants, and then it's like cuisine variety, like more types of restaurants, the hip restaurants, those types of things. But then it's also like, if you groceries, right? So why do you need to go to the physical grocery store if you can get it delivered home to you, right? So like, how can we create convenience? So sort of my vision is how do we, again, it's like giving people time back, but it's being that app for the convenience app on your phone. So like if you need something delivered to your house, whether it is a birthday present you forgot to buy, it is some food, or it is you're cooking pasta and you forgot to buy the pasta sauce, you can get that delivered. So just being that convenience app, whatever you need, wherever you are in the country, you can get it delivered within 30 minutes.
Yeah, an opener, wine opener, pepper, just get it all delivered
right?
to once. It's life-changing. I think it's really worked. I haven't tried, of course, in Norway, but in Barcelona, in Spain, it works so well. The Glovo.
You use Glovo there, or was it something else?
Yeah, I was using Glovo a lot, actually, when I was living there. It really helped me. I was like, we're doing this. Oh, we don't have some tools. We just order because we just moved to a new place. Amazing. No time wasted.
Exactly.
I really loved it. It's very
convenient. Then you
can
spend your time, I don't know, surfing or, I don't
know. Or reading, doing whatever you enjoy.
Yeah, I don't know if you
That's
surf
amazing.
in Barcelona. Is that a surf place? I'm not sure.
Yeah. You can. I haven't surfed in Barcelona, only outside, but you can actually do it also in the city. It's very different surf, but you can. I would say kite surfing is better there in the city. But if you go out of town, it's just, there are some nice places, especially if you go towards Costa Brava.
All right. Okay.
You can do cycling in the morning or reverse and then go to the coast just for some surf or kite surf. It's amazing.
Very nice.
A good destination, I recommend. Okay, amazing. So that's a different industry. Very, I think, for sure, dynamic. So I'm curious about you and your leadership style, and maybe how do you manage so many people And we're talking about two different types of employment. And yeah, and every single one kind of carries also the brand, the responsibility about the company. They represent who you are as a company. So how do you do that? I'm very curious.
So I think it's a good question, right? So it's a lot about, one is like you have to walk the talk and you have to lead by example. Because in the end of the day, what I realize as a leader, it's kind of like whatever that you say, even though you don't think about it so much, people will analyze and get meaning out of what you say, even if you haven't thought about it yourself. So you kind of have to be conscious and intentional because, things will be read into it. So it kind of starts with like, what is the type of culture that I want to build in the company, right? And I believe, obviously I've seen kind of what are some of the things that I really believe in from working in kind of big tech, and also what does this industry need? So it is a combination of like that reality. So it's kind of like giving people, like a vision and like these are the ways of working. So like our leadership principles, this is, these are the values of the company and those types of things. And I'm actually representing that. And I think a lot of it is like you need to do that in a scaled way. So part of that can be like when you have all hands or when you talk to the press, or like what are the things that you represent in those aspects. But then it's also around, when with my leadership team, right? What is the way that I lead them, which in essence can also trickle down indirectly, right? So I'm a big believer of freedom with responsibility, right? So like try not to micromanage. Again, this is a business that's very operational, very much like day-to-day numbers focus. So it's like finding that balance, right? Like then it's really important that you have the right people, the people who are, you empower the right people who have the right skills and know what they're doing, know their shit, so to speak, so that you can then obviously create the right kind of milestones that you can follow up on, and of course be able to track that so that if something falls to pieces on the way, that you can catch it quick enough to change course. But then actually provide this type of kind of like, as we call it in foodora, like freedom to create your own journey, so to speak. So I'm a big proponent of like the big picture things. You align on, you agree these are the things, but then exactly how you execute on that might depend on like what are your kind of personality traits and your strengths, so to speak. Like how do you actually activate your strengths to make that happen? Like I'm a big proponent of that. So you should just enable people to kind of do their best work. And I think part of that leadership style then is, and I learned a lot about this in my time in Meta, was around situational leadership, right? Which is that, two people who are different personalities, the way that you lead them might be slightly different, right? But it could also be the case that somebody is really good at something, and in that thing where they have a high skill level, they need mostly coaching, but then there's something else where maybe they're completely new to something, where they need to be more direct. You need to be more directive in your leadership style, right? So it also depends, like your situational leadership style, both depends on the person, but also the type of task. So it is a wide variety of kind of like, part of it is intuitive, right? You have to just be intuitive and kind of matching the energy and your sense of what it is. And then I think it's really just about having an open feedback culture, because we all have our blind spots, right? You think you perceive the world in a certain way and that people perceive you in that way, but it might not always be the case. So actually creating a culture where people can say what they think rather than what they think you want to hear, because otherwise you just get the your own exhaust back. You want to be able to actually get value. So that also goes back into leading by example. Like if I want to be able to gain credibility giving other people feedback, then I also need to be able to ask other people for feedback on myself and do that regularly to create a bit of a rhythm around that. And I think it's also like having those hard conversations more often. That was actually one of the things that I also took a lot from Sheryl Sandberg back in the day when she was still at Facebook, was that when she would hold some of her trainings for new managers, she would ask in the room, how many of you have had a difficult conversation or a challenging conversation in the last week? And then usually like people would raise their hand and it would be like maybe 10, 15%. And she's like, oh, that's not enough. We need to get to a place where everybody's having those conversations every week, right? Where you actually are looking at, everybody can grow. Like you always have blind spots. You always things you can become better at, and creating a culture where you don't create complacency and people are just accepting the status quo, but you're always trying to develop each other. So that's a kind of continuous challenge, but that's part of, I guess, the leadership philosophy and the way of things are going. But yeah, it's I guess it's broad, but going back to what I started with, it's, starting at the top, setting the values that are common, and then it's more like on an individual basis, depending on the individual and how you approach them. But it's also like how am I approachable when I'm in the office, for example. Like I try to be a bit of a nomad, you know. I don't have my own desk. We kind of like sit in one
So you
corner one day,
vagabond through the floors.
this type of thing, right? So just like trying to be accessible and available so that, you know, you get a feel of what people are thinking, and they can also ask you and raise points to you to create as much of like a non-hierarchical, like flat structure as possible.
That's pretty cool about that, especially that you took so many great insights from your time at Meta and Facebook with all those asking the hard questions. I feel like more and more in nowadays society, we're afraid to ask the hard questions, and we are too afraid to offend someone or to make someone feel uncomfortable instead of actually just having a conversation and growing and taking it as a learning. So that's pretty cool that you're having it in your company.
Yeah, try, you know, it's a continuous journey. You know, I think
always.
it is more comfortable not to have it, you know, but you have to, if you want to grow and if you want to build the best company, essentially, you want to be the most competitive, you need to be able to have those hard conversations, because otherwise, you know, people will go to their comfort zones, and that's okay. But particularly in like a hyper competitive industry, then you will become irrelevant, right? In the long run. So you want to avoid ending up in that situation, becoming the next, what is it? Sun Microsystems. That was now the lights went off in this room. You can still see me, right?
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay. Maybe it's actually better now with the light.
Good.
Have a bit of an aura now.
Yeah, you're like now the same. Good, we're gonna move to the topics of well-being, balance. So it's
exactly finding that. So I would say the Facebook headquarters is the old Sun Microsystems, where the building is with the old Sun Microsystems. So they put the Facebook logo on the backside. You still kept the old Sun Microsystems logo, and the idea was like, you know, if we don't keep ourselves on our toes, we will become the next Sun Microsystems. You know, so that's kind of this aspect, and I think it's particularly true for, you know, like the industry that I'm in. But if you look at you know, the top 100 or like the top 10 Fortune 500 companies, you know, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, you don't see any of the same, you know, 10 or 20 years later, because, you know, with things changing so quickly, you need to be able to disrupt your own business models to be able to survive and to be able to keep up. But then it is those companies that can be agile, and as you get bigger, it is more challenging, right? So that's one of the things that we try to stay true to.
Do you think when Meta became big, they were still able to work in an agile way?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question, right? I think Meta went through a couple of rounds of layoffs when I was there as well, and of course, it's very difficult processes. But I think when companies become too big, then you end up with a lot of quote unquote like bullshit jobs, as there's somebody wrote a book about, where it's like people do something. I think the issue with some of these large companies is then you hire really smart people, but then the job scope of what you can do is very specialized, and you're not necessarily creating, like, you become indispensable in the end of the day, right? Because you just become a big institution or a big machine, so to speak, which I think a lot of people end up, you know, staying there because it's very, you know, it's very comfortable and you have a lot of good benefits. But then in the long run, you might not, you know, create so much that drive or that, you know, that much sense of meaning. So I think, you know, Facebook as a company that is this big, they have been able to reinvent themselves quite a few times. You know, like Snap was about to disrupt them and with stories, but then they were able to replicate that model and became bigger. Instagram became bigger than on stories and Snap within a year, and then, you know, similar thing with TikTok and Reels, right? So been good
really fast actually with that one. The spin-off.
Exactly. So I think so far, yes. Obviously, there's a lot of other things there, and you know, it's, if you look at the stock price of Meta, there was a period when nobody had the belief in. They're like, oh, Mark is spending all his money on the metaverse, and you know, he doesn't know what he's doing. And the stock price went down to like $80. It like plummeted, and people thought, okay, this is the end. Like nobody had a belief in anything. And then now it's like 500, you know, like 2 years later or 1.5 years later. So things can shift. And I think thanks to Mark, I mean, he has a lot of, for good and for bad, right? Obviously now he's trying to align himself with the new political establishment in the US, etc. You can say what you want about that, but you know, he's a long-term thinker and can predict kind of future trends and capitalize on them in an effective way, or I guess together with his tech team, so to speak, right? So far, but who is to say in 10 years time? So you can only say for today, and tomorrow we will not know what that will bring, right? In terms of like regulation, like antitrust, etc., breaking up the company, and that will provide other types of challenges. But the same with Google, right? When I left Google, I thought, okay, the growth days of Google are going to be over, and now it's 12, 13 years later, and it's still quite a decent company in terms of the innovation that they're able to do. Because again, with the AI race, it's the companies that have hundreds of billions of dollars to invest in this LLMs and all of these technologies that can build a scale and advantage. But yeah, I cannot say what tomorrow will bring. I can definitely say that so far, for now, they still are some of those behemoths in the world.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for your insights and for sharing. So you've been mentioning about how important it is to people business, to grow with teams, to act, to lead by example. I love the fact that you're a proponent of this whole flat hierarchy and you vagabond for your own company. And that's the best thing ever, I think, and being accessible. But in order to do that, we all do need energy, right? If you don't have inner energy, if you don't have inner strength, there won't be any growth. So how do you do that? Family, huge company, personal needs. So how do you stay focused and energized to live your days to the fullest?
Yeah, I would say it's the challenge. Every day is a new challenge, let's say, right? It's like, have some ambitions of like working out more. Before I started Foodora, I was doing CrossFit more days per week. Now I'm happy with like 1 to 2. The ambition is 2 times a week. Now it's more like 1 time. So I'm trying to up it. So like you're always, on that side, you're always going to suboptimize because you have limited amount of time, right? You only have the 24 hours in a day. You have the demands at work. You have the demands at home. And you have I like this kind of concept of like the energy project, where you look at like what's important for your physical energy, your mental energy, your spiritual energy, etc. Right? And there's kind of like, what are some of the minimums? Like, okay, what is the best case scenario, and what is kind of like the middle case scenario, and what do you want to avoid to kind of deplete your batteries, right? So for me, it's like, okay, if I get, ideally, I want to get like 7 to 8 hours of sleep, but okay, if I get 6 hours uninterrupted or 6.5 hours, then I'm still happy. And then I know, for example, if I drink too much alcohol, or if I drink alcohol, then that's going to impact my sleep quality, right? So if I get very little sleep, then perhaps if it's a day where like my kids are waking up at night, then probably I want to avoid alcohol, because then otherwise there's going to be low amount of sleep and also low sleep quality, right? So it's like a double whammy, so to speak. So for me, I try to keep it really simple, right? Okay, what are the core aspects that are important for my overall well-being? And that is really around, nutrition. Again, so what I'm doing there, because I'm not able to work out as much, I'm trying to do like intermittent fasting at least. So at least I decrease the window of when I can eat, right? So I incorporated that. I try to, do the aspects with sleep. And then I think it's just like being hyper-focused on, being efficient with your day, right? So for me, it's kind of like from when I wake up until I go to work, it's just getting the kids ready for, kindergarten. And it's like, it's chaos basically. And then I get to work, and it's like, actually, when I'm at work, it's some of the most relaxing time, because you use a different part of your mind. It's like less physical. It's more like your intellect, and it's, you're not being interrupted every 2 minutes, that type of thing. So it's a different thing. And then you try to be as efficient as possible. So I try most days to be able to pick up at least one of the kids in kindergarten before they close. And then it's like the evening routine, and then in terms of like getting them to sleep, and then maybe having if kind of 1 hour in the evening to relax, with my partner, and maybe like watch a series or whatever, and that's probably like the most relaxing part of the day. If I'm able to get that hour, then or like half an hour even, that would be nice. So it is kind of optimizing, and then sometimes things go out of whack. For example, if a kid is sick and they can't go to kindergarten, or like there are these things where you just have to kind of deal with those in the moment. So we have like, okay, if this happens, then okay, do one of us stay at home, or do we, grandparents, are they able to support? Or it's like you could kind of just have to figure it out. But again, it goes back to kind of what I was talking about at the beginning. It's like I enjoy just having a lot of things going on, and then okay, you have to figure out how to solve for it. It's never going to be perfect, but you just try to make the most out of it, right? To be present in those situations that you're in. So when I'm at home in the morning with the chaos, I'm just like embracing that chaos, And then it's kind of, I'm at work, how can I be the best leader that I can be at work? And then so again, it's kind of like a bit like the situational leadership thing, right? Okay, how do I just embrace that moment that I'm in, rather than saying, okay, what should I be doing in this moment? Because then you're just creating frustration, and you just have to kind of optimize your time as much as possible. But again, it's just like about your non-negotiables. Like my sleep, for example, I need to, avoid screen time just before going to bed, for example, because I don't want my head to be buzzing when I put my head on the pillow because I've just been thought about a hard conversation I'm going to have tomorrow, because then I'm not going to fall asleep. So I also need to, sometimes your brain is not your friend. It can overreact and overanalyze. So you need to also realize, how do you use your brain and the things in the right situation?
For sure. We need to make agreements with ourselves and stick to them. And I think that's the hardest part, that we can make those agreements, but we don't stick to them.
Exactly.
But I'm a firm believer we can shift our mindset, and we can really, really make it work. Okay, amazing. You're really, really efficient and full of energy. And like from back in the days when we met and got in touch, I do recall you being a very entrepreneurial, always on top of the game of anything you do, always moving, doing something, MBA, and then different roles, different initiatives, then emceeing somewhere. So tell me, for someone who is also very into different various projects, how did you stay basically for 10 years, 8 years, 10 years in working within the same company?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? So I think it was also because the company was growing a lot over that period of time. So there was new opportunities that came around. Again, as I talked about, when I joined Facebook, there was no ads on Instagram. And obviously they came stories, they came reels. The culture also changed, evolved. So there was different things. And I started as an individual contributor, where I was kind of just doing my own specialist. And then I explored people management. I was really passionate about that. Was able to do new roles. So I think it was just it just evolved over time, where it's kind of like when, and, at some point in time, it was, it was good. And perhaps maybe, you also need to figure out when is enough time enough, and perhaps it was around that time. Maybe it could have been earlier, but I obviously got new opportunities, etc. But yeah, finding things that you can, I think it's always about your own curiosity in the end of the day as well. One is what is given to you, or like what opportunities come across. The other thing is like what do you make of those opportunities, because it's not what happens to you, but it's what you do with what happens to you, right? This type of philosophy. And I think it's also like, like that curiosity, like being able to learn something new or taking that further. Nobody's going to tell you to that, but that's really like how you can grow. And I think you can really grow within your own role if you try to look at things in a new way, or try to take proactivity, new responsibilities. I think as managers, as leaders, you love people who are proactive and who are taking on more things outside of what is in your job description, right? So I think it's just that approach as well, to kind of create the most out of that white space in your job and make it interesting. And I think that's perhaps what made me stay there for so long.
Amazing. And looking back at your career and life decisions, are there any decisions you regret taking or not taking?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's things that you can look back on and you can see like, oh, I would have loved to do that differently. Actually, I don't. I'm a very much a person who is living in the moment. It kind of goes back to that, where like having regrets, you can reflect and you can say, how can you do something better? That's obviously important for self-reflection and becoming I'm more self-reflective today than I was 10 years ago, for sure. Less just seeking the next, like dopamine hit, so to speak. Now it's less enjoying and appreciating the more simple things in life, I would say. And that's definitely something that comes with time. So with maturity and with time and with growth. So I think my younger self was perhaps even more uneasy and getting impatient very, very fast, and, being able to actually understand the importance of going deep and actually having depth into things, right? It was like when I graduated from business school for my bachelor's, at that point in time, everybody was saying, oh, I want to be a leader when I leave, or like in Exec, it was the same. Everybody wanted to be a leader. Nobody wanted to be somebody who's doing stuff, just like be a leader. And actually, I think now the current generation of people, they're less interested to be leaders, actually, because I guess after COVID, like I think it shifted certain priorities in certain generations. Again, it's very generalized, but I think it's just this element of being able to go into depth, and actually you can learn by going deeper into something and not just thinking that, okay, I have the superficial understanding of something and that's good enough and I can move on to something new, the next flashy thing. So I think I was a bit more focused on that in my younger self. So that's definitely something else. But what I wouldn't change is my curiosity. I've always enjoyed, exploring new things, traveling, living new places. And I think that has brought me a lot. So like not follow the linear career path and just like, oh, this is how you're supposed to do it. A lot of people in my business school back in the day were like, oh, they want to work in investment banking or consulting, or like everyone following very traditional paths. And there's perhaps a lot of them are doing the same thing right now, or they didn't really like what they did and they're doing something completely different. But for me, it's brought me a lot, just like following my curiosity and just exploring things that I'm not necessarily a specialist in and seeing where that goes, which has brought me to where I am now. But who knows where it's going to bring me in the future.
Yeah, you never know. Wow, so you've been mentioning curiosity, and for us, I think it comes as a common thing, just being curious about the world and being brave enough. But I've been having some conversations recently with people who are still considering changing their careers, changing their directions, changing the departments. And for some of them, it seems to be a really big decision because it's, of course, outside the comfort zone. From your experience, do you think, can we learn to be more curious and to get that courage? Or what would be your advice maybe for someone who is
I think it's a really good question. Yeah? I would say yes and no. Everything has a nuance, right? I think obviously there's some people who are innately, based on their personality or their kind of, nature nurture, are more curious in general. But I think it's also a learned ability, right? It is also like a perception where you have, as an example, like culturally, like some people from certain parts of the world can be more cynical on average than others, depending on where it is, like not to mention specific countries, but, it can vary from place to place. And I think, obviously people who have grown up in a different culture, lived in somewhere else, you can open up or expand their mind, right? And I'm a big proponent of like neuroplasticity, and I'm sure you are as well, right? Your brain can constantly evolve, and you can, with new information, and if you have an open mindset, like if you take my parents as an example, like they're, in their 70s, and they are still like very young at heart. They're very engaged, they're very open-minded, but a lot of old people become very like closed-minded and like, this is what I know. And so I think it is, part is obviously personality, but it's part like, what is that mindset that you want to have? You think about, I don't know if we did this in Isaac, but it's kind of like, what is that legacy when you die? How do you want to be remembered?
Yeah.
And that's one exercise perhaps that you can do, right? Like, in order for you to be remembered that way, what does that require of you? And then you can reverse engineer. Like if I'm a very skeptical, a very kind of binary person, okay, if I want to be more curious, what is required of me? Like, do I need to open myself up to more, I don't know, go to more events, or like try to do things? Or like if you're very introverted, for example, like some things might be more difficult for you to do, then like how can I do that within the scope of my own personality, right? So I think it's something that we all can do depending on what are our traits and the things that we are attracted towards. But yeah, it is more challenging for certain people versus others. In the end of the day, I think the most important thing is that you feel happy with your own body and your own self and where you're going. I think the worst thing is that you feel regret if it's something that you really want to do, but you don't have a way to do it. So you either come to terms with it or you find a way. And that finding a way could be that curiosity.
Very well said. So look, Prashant, we're getting closer to the end, and I do have this tradition that I like my guests to leave with one question to ponder through the day of the audience who is listening here. So what would be your question for the audience?
So my question would be, what would you do if you weren't afraid?
Bingo. Nothing else to add. Thank you so much for joining today with Perception Paradox. How can people follow your journey?
So you can follow my journey. I'm on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect me on LinkedIn. I try to post some different things there, here and there. So feel free to connect or to follow on LinkedIn. I think that's probably the easiest thing. But yeah, thank you so much for inviting me on this podcast. It's been a great conversation. And yeah, looking forward to hearing more conversations in this channel in the future.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening. See you next week.
See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.